things, and I'm telling you, I'm going to give you a small fraction of what she does. Okay, first of all, she has 2 master's degrees. Then she has a doctorate in education. She is a doctor, Dr. Jackson. And some of the things, she is an educator, so some of the things that she does, as far as she has rewrote discipline procedures, you established a PTO organization, you wrote the curriculum for a summer school program. She's a diversity leader as well. So she has done this work, and I'm pretty sure when we're done, me and her are going to have a conversation about some of the things that she's going to give me tips on to make this program better, and that's quite okay. The last thing I want to say, I have the same friends since high school, and I'll show you a picture of them in session 3. She's been our moms. She's been our mothers. She has taken care of us, and she has also put us in shape when we needed it. And it's nice to have a second mom up here to tell her story about what it's like being a parent in Loveland. Dr. Jackson, if I say any more, I might start busting out in tears. So I'm just going to invite you up. Come on, Mrs. Jackson. Everybody welcome Mrs. Jackson.
I'm like my friend here, don't start my time yet. You know, one of the good things about being at the place in our life that Wes and I are, this is my husband right here, we get to see how good God is. I remember when these little boys would come running in one side and going out the other, dripping Kool-Aid over the floor and all that kind of mess. They come in one door and go out the other. Where are y'all going? We're going to play foot out one door and into the other. And this went on all day long. We watched them grow up, Wes and I. We watched them go to high school. We watched them go to college. Wes and I got to go to Allison and Hakeem's wedding, one of the nicest events we ever went to. We got to see that. And now we get to see our children be contributors and begin to talk about a conversation that is so absolutely important that it just scares me. So if I seem a little weepy, or if I seem a little overwhelmed, see, in my world, I'm a church lady. In my world, I say, praise the Lord. And thank you, Jesus, for allowing me to see how good God really is. I'm so proud of you. Jimmy and Nicholas and Blair. Blair used to be at the bank and count my money. I'm so proud of that. No, that's the truth. That's the truth. I remember when I was a little girl, my sister and I and my friends were doing the same thing. We go running in the kitchen, and one day my mother got so mad. She said, "You guys are just not going to be anything." Well, that stuck with me. And I got grown and I said, "Well, Ma, why did you say that about us?" She said, "Because I knew it would make you mad. It would be an incentive to push you forward." That's part of a mother's job. Making her children mad. Loving them when they need it. Kissing them when they want it. But pushing them forward. Start the clock.
Okay.
They're also my breads, too. Courageous conversations. Living, working, raising children in a hospital environment. See, that was my first topic. When Hakeem asked me to do this, at first I said no, because I always say no, because the former president of SWO is sitting over there. I don't need one more thing to do. And I thought about it. Raising kids in this neighborhood, in this area, was living in a hostile environment. Born in Akron, Ohio, oldest of 4 kids, from kindergarten to graduate school, the 3rd time, all of my time done in public schools. I worked in every job except being a janitor in the kitchen in this school. I've been a paraprofessional all the way to a building principal. I've written curriculum, I've done all that kind of stuff. Most important job I had was being a mother. My husband and I had 3 sons. We got a transfer in 1990. They were educated here, and while the quality of their education was in many respects good, there's so much about that experience that was horrible. Yes, it was horrible. I will share some of them with you. I'm not going to dwell on them, because the purpose of us being here today is to appeal to our community members that our schools can be the best place for all children to be. We must insist that our public is educated, and we must insist that we expose our children to people who are different than themselves. Last Wednesday happened. The title of my conversation changed. Now, my title is Courageous Conversations, Our Values. The tenor of these remarks changed because of the embarrassing, overwhelming, unexpected events of last week. I knew something was going to happen. I knew it. I felt it in my gut. Wes and I talked about it every day. I felt it in my spirit. I knew if 45 didn't win that election, something horrible was going to happen. I just never thought that what happened would be the thing that would kick us over. I was not wrong. I am honored to be able to share my story with you. These events happened in my family. This is my story. I feel very capable of talking about the one place in our community that every single one of us depends on, and that's public education. So you see, our children learn how to live in a big community. Whether your kid goes to public school or private school, the experiences that he gains in that school setting affect who they are and what they do for the rest of their life. Schools are important. Our schools are a mini society. Rules written and unwritten are the ones they experience. Let's face it, a good school adds value to our property, and it makes our communities richer. Without a good school, our communities will perish. Every child who attends school should feel safe, emotionally and physically. For my kids who are Loveland graduates, that didn't happen all the time. Throughout my time as a parent, I felt the unwritten rules of institutional racism, of privilege, of those kind of things intruding in my life. One of my sons told me that my challenges and my expectations of teachers made it hard on him. And maybe that's true. But I wanted faculty to understand that they had to get the best education possible. I wanted staff to know that our encounters were not just between teacher and parent, I being the parent, they being the teacher, but our encounters were teachers to teachers. I was a professional, earning a paycheck as a teacher every day. When I went to a conference, I knew what I was talking about. I knew what I was looking for my kids, and I knew what I needed. However, so often, those teaching professionals in the school district looked at me as a black parent that didn't have any right to say anything or ask any questions. I used the same matrices that educators use to make decisions about their kids. Too often I had to explain to a teacher what my needs were for my kids, and I expected my needs to be respected. Who goes to a conference with a child's teacher? Who goes to a conference with a child's teacher and the teacher comes off crazy, and then you got to come off and tell that person who you are, what you got, what you expect, and about your drink? Who does that? That's not normal. I did. We wanted our sons, Wesley and I, to be proud men, but also assets to their communities, whatever they chose in life to do. But I can't be critical about the schools, without being grateful. My children received special handling by some staff members and administrators. Mr. Lee and Hakeem. Our children received special handling. They were encouraged to propel. I will be forever grateful for them. But there is still that darker side of the Lovely City School experience that I'm not going to forget either. For it's those experiences that have driven my professional life as a teacher. And I swore that if I ever got to be a teacher, I would never let happen to me that happened to my kids. A few experiences. Few of you have had the experience of listening to a teacher tell your child that he does not live in the house, but he said he does. Our home, unbeknownst to us, was chosen to be featured in the Loveland profile in the early 90s. That child was in about the 3rd or 4th grade. He saw the magazine on the desk and he said, "That's my house." The teacher told him that could not be his house. And of course he said it was, and he insisted. And the teacher kept telling him that it wasn't. So that evening when we got home, my children and I got in the car and we went down to City Hall over here to pay a utility bill. And as we were leaving, in walks the teacher. I guess she was doing the same thing. And my son says, "Mommy, there she is. There's the lady that said we don't live in our house." I looked at her and I asked her, I said, "Did you say that?" I can't remember what her answer was. I said, "Guess what? He lives in the house and I do too." Another time, I got a call to come and pick up another son. For you see, this son kept saying, a teacher asked him what he wanted to be when he got up, and he said, "I want to be a candy man." He said, so the teacher and he got into this dialogue, "I want to be a candy man." My son was horrified. They sent him to the office, and they accused him of selling drugs. And they told me to come and get my son right now. I left my job, and I went to the school. And I was asked to take him home. He was in about the 7th grade. See, she didn't know our story. She didn't know when the kids were little, my husband and I would take them to the Hartford Civic Center to see a show or to shop or to do something cool. And in the corners of one of the halls in the Civic Center, there was a profoundly disabled man. I think he was sight impaired, but certainly he had some problems with some of his limbs. It was at that time, after walking around, Wesley would always buy the boys a treat, whatever candy they wanted. And if you looked at his wagon, there were M&Ms, there were chocolate bars with almonds, there were Hershey's Kisses, there were all kind of good things. And the boys could pick out whatever candy they wanted. They would talk to the man. They would go over and they'd talk to the man. So the man expected to see them every week or so when we would go up there, and the kids would expect to see him. That was the candy man. My little boy wanted to be a candy man just like him, so he could have all the candy he wanted in the world. But the teacher thought that my black child was talking about selling drugs, and he would have the audacity in saying that in a class. But the most egregious thing that happened to us happened because of cultural insensitivity and white privilege. Our son, our oldest son, unbeknownst to us, was gifted. And the guidance counselor in Connecticut at our sending school was so adamant about Lee being into, and I said I wouldn't mention any names, I'm sorry, our oldest son being into gifted classes, that he wanted me to make sure that I hooked him up with the guidance counselor here. So I did. You guys remember? No, you guys are too young. Used to be a calling card, had a whole lot of numbers on it. Okay, you get on the telephone and you call the calling card. Okay, so I had a calling card. I stood in the office at the high school, used my calling card, called the guidance counselor who was a buddy of mine in Connecticut, and I brokered a conversation because I wanted to make sure that my oldest kid got his needs fulfilled. They didn't put him in gifted classes because they said he wasn't a part of the gifted regime here. This young man had already had a year or two of foreign language. He was an 8th grader. He was already in advanced sciences and advanced algebra. Loveland didn't even have those courses. He was denied access in being a part of the gifted program because he wasn't here. Lee did it again. Figured it out. And unbeknownst to Wesley and I, he took his little self to the principal and demanded an audience. And he said, "I want to be in all AP classes." At that time, he was the president of the junior class. He was on the football team and was doing some other stuff. His dad and I thought it was too much for him, but he didn't. He got in those classes anyway. All the encounters and so many more have to do with institutional racism and white privilege. Whether we are in this room or not, we have to admit our community has a problem. Pew Research in 2020 said that 6 out of 10 Americans feel that things are generally bad in America. I have the breakdown, but I'm not going to take time to read it. A writer by the name of Terry Kettering said something like, there's an elephant in the room. There's an elephant in the room, it's large and squatting. It's so large you can't get around it. And yet we squeeze by it with a how are you and I am fine and other forms of trivial chatter. There's an elephant in the room. We all know it's there. We're thinking about the elephant today as we talk together. It's constantly on our minds. For you see, there's an elephant in our room. Finally, Robin DiAngelo in her best-selling book, White Fragility, Why It Is So Hard for White People to Talk About Racism, says that people who live in the dominant don't really have to acknowledge that there's a dual system in existence within the United States, handed down from the very beginning of our country, and it has impacted all of us. One of those places that reinforces this unwritten rule is our schools. Simply put, if we want things to do better, we have to demand that our school districts do better. We have to initiate these conversations. And yes, they feel uncomfortable, but they are necessary. They're conversations, unless we do the hard work in these conversations. What happened last week in Washington, D.C. will happen more often for all of us. I have a little poem I want to share with you as I close. It's on the wall of the Holocaust Museum. First they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out, because I'm not a socialist. And then they came for the trade union, but I did not speak out, because I'm not a trade unionist. And then they came for the Jews. I did not speak out, because I'm not a Jew. And then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Jackson.